What's up, my peeps? This is Mr. Fagan here, starting on day 5, rhombuses and rectangles, and let's just jump right into it. Let's go over what a rhombus actually is. And a rhombus is a parallelogram with 4 congruent sides. So these sides are all congruent to each other. So they have 2 sets of parallel sides. So we say BC is parallel to ED. And we also say CD is parallel to BE. All right, so 2 sets of parallel sides, 4 congruent sides. Okay. Also, you can note that a rhombus does not have right angles, unlike a rectangle. And diagonals are perpendicular. If you ever see the sign that kind of looks like that, are perpendicular and they bisect one another. So what does that mean? So when they bisect and they're perpendicular, we know that they create right angles. So if they create a right angle, that means that angle is 90 degrees. And because they bisect each other, we could say that this is congruent to that. And if we said, I don't know, we can make this like the letter F here. So we could say BF is congruent to FD and CF is congruent to FE, if that makes sense. Okay, so rectangles are parallelograms with 4 right angles, as you could see noted in the picture to the right, and diagonal angles are also congruent. So these diagonal angles are congruent to one another. And yeah, that's pretty much it on that, okay? I know I kind of threw it at you pretty fast, but it's pretty easy, all right? If you need to pause the video at any time, please go ahead and do it. So let's go over some of these true or false. If false, explain why is it false. Okay, so a rectangle is a parallelogram. Well, is a rectangle a parallelogram? Indeed it is. Okay, is a parallelogram always a rhombus? Well, no, that is false. But why is that false? A rhombus is always a parallelogram. A parallelogram isn't always a rhombus. So we can say it's false because rhombus is always a parallelogram. Okay, my handwriting isn't the greatest, so I apologize. Is a rhombus a rectangle? False. Why is that false? Well, there are no right angles. Come on. No right angles. What about a rhombus always being a kite? Rhombus being a kite? And no, that would be false as well. And why? Because kites, congruent sides are consecutive. So kites, congruent sides are consecutive. Is rhombus always a parallelogram? Well, yeah, we already stated that up here. So, yes, that is true. All right, pretty easy. Match which of the following quadrilaterals has the given property. Okay, so all sides are congruent. Well, what does that match? What did we just say? All sides are congruent. Go back up to this. Well, that has to be a rhombus. So what is rhombus here? That is C. So that is just the properties of a rhombus. What about all angles being congruent? What does that fit? Well, that's got to fit a rectangle because that's just properties of a rectangle. All angles are congruent. All angles are 90 degrees. What about the diagonal angles are congruent? Diagonal angles are congruent. Well, that would also be a rectangle. What about opposite angles are congruent? Well, opposite angles are congruent. There's a couple. We know opposite angles are congruent. That's a parallelogram. It's also a rectangle, and that's also a rhombus. And the sum of interior angles that equals 360. Well, we know four interior angles have to equal 360. So that would be a parallelogram, rectangle, a rhombus, and a quadrilateral. So that's all of them. And if you remember, if you take those 4 angles, subtract it from 2 times 180, well, what does that get you? That gets you 360 degrees. So those all work there. All right. If I move too fast, please just pause the video. I know I can talk pretty quick sometimes, so again, my apologies. So for this one, we're going to make a little change here so we get better numbers. Instead of 4x, we're going to make this guy 5x. And this actually becomes somewhat of just a plug and chug, and it's pretty easy. So the first thing we're going to do is figure out step 1, which is going to be solve for, what do I want to solve for? Let's solve for x first, okay? So this is a rectangle, okay? So we know that that and that are congruent. So if those are congruent, then we know we could set up 5x equals a 20, divide by 5, and we get x equals 4. Simple enough. Our next step, we want to solve for y. Okay, so for y, how would we figure that out? Well, first thing we got to do, we got to plug this 4 back into here. And if we said 5 times 4, that would give you 20. Now, we know the measure of this angle and the measure of this angle has to equal what? Well, it has to equal 90. Let's use a different color here. So if we said, all right, 3y minus 5 plus what? Plus the 20 has to equal 90. Now it just becomes combining like terms. And what we get is 3y plus 15 equals 90. Subtract the 15. You get 3y equals 75. And what do you get for y? Y equals 25. That is pretty simple. Okay, coolio? Sweet. All right. Use the rhombus PRYZ to find the measurement of the following. Given that, okay, this information. Okay, so let's roll through this first. So they want to figure out what PY is. So where is PY? Let's look. So they want to see this whole thing right there. All right, so we know that PK equals 4y plus 1, and KY equals 7y minus 14. But what do we know here? Okay, we know that these are the same. So if they are the same, we just equal them to one another. So what we could say is 4y plus 1 equals 7y minus 14. Now it's just becoming combining of like terms. And this becomes pretty easy. We can do this in one fair swoop here. So we say, okay, plus 14 here, plus 14 here. We want to do minus 4y here, minus 4y here. That gives me 15 on this side. That gives me 3y on this side. Now, if you divide the 15 by the 3, you get y equals 5. Now, are we done there? No, we are not. We still got to plug it back in. They want to know the whole length. Okay, so if you plug that 5 into either one, doesn't matter. I'll plug it back into the PK. So you say 4 times 5 plus 1. Well, that's 21. But they didn't want just 21. They wanted the whole length. So 21 times 2 gives you 42, which equals PY. And that is your answer. That whole length. Okay? We good? We good? I'm going to erase this just so I have some more space here. All right, so next, sort of the same deal. They're looking at RZ. Let's erase this. So now they're looking at the whole length, RZ, right here. And they're saying RK equals 3x minus 1, and KZ equals 2x plus 6. So we know, again, that these are the same. So if they are the same, we just equal them to one another, and we say 3x x minus 1 equals 2x plus 6. All right, same sort of deal. I'm going to combine your terms, figure out what x is. All right, so if we do it in one fair swoop, we say minus 2x plus 1 plus 1. What you get over here is x. What you get over here is 7. So you get x equals 7. Now, if we plug that back in, we can plug it back into the RK. We say 3 times 7 minus 1. Well, 3 times 7 gives me what? That's 21 minus 1. You get RK equals 20. But they want the whole length. So all we have to do is multiply that by 2, and you get RZ equals 40 is the entire length. Pretty simple, right? Not too bad. Sort of just a plug and chug and bringing you back to the old school algebra days. All right, cool. Let me erase that. We'll go down to the measure of YKZ. So let's do that. Okay, so they want YKZ. So let's outline this and see what we're dealing with here. So YKZ. All right, so what do we know about that? How would you figure that out? We don't have any information, but what does our rules tell us? We know that what? Diagonal lines are perpendicular. And if they are perpendicular, that means that it has to be a 90-degree angle. Not much math to do there. Just knowing your principles and your rules will get you through that solution. Okay? Next one here might be a little bit tougher. So what are they asking for? They want to know what YZ is. Well, how do we figure that out? Okay, so let's go back and talk about some things that we do know. Okay, so what do we know so far? We know that ZK was equal to 20. We also know that KY was equal to 21. So let's mark those down. So ZK was 20, and we said KY was 21. Okay, and they want to know what that is. Well, how do we figure that out? Okay, and we also know because these are perpendicular, there is your right angle. So if that is your right angle, opposite of the right angle has to be what? Your hypotenuse. So now we can just do what? If you said Pythagorean Theorem, you were correct. So we take a squared plus b squared equals c squared. And remember that the c is always your hypotenuse. Okay? So now it doesn't matter what a and b is. We could put 20 in as a or 20 in as b. Doesn't matter. But once we plug this in, this is going to give us our length, or that side of, what was it? YZ. Okay, so we say 20 squared plus 21 squared equals c squared. Well, what does that become? If you plug that into your calculator, you should get a total of, what did I get here? 841. 841. And that's going to equal your c squared. So now we got to get rid of this. How do we end up doing that? Root it. The square root of 841 will give you 29. And that's going to equal c, or your hypotenuse. And that is your length of YZ. So let's write it out proper. Say YZ equals 29. Perfect. Okay. So just remember, and something you can note in looking at this, okay, is that YZ is opposite of the right angle. So therefore, it has to be your hypotenuse. So has to be your hypotenuse. Again, sorry for my handwriting. All right, and just remember, C is always your hypotenuse, okay? C is always your hypotenuse. All right, cool. I think we only got one more here. Yep. All right, based on the figure below, which statements are true? Okay, so let's go through this. All right, is the figure a rectangle? Well, is it a rectangle? Well, indeed it is, because that is congruent to that, and that is congruent to that. So by definition of a rectangle, we could say, yeah, that works. Okay, is the figure a parallelogram? Well, indeed it is. That's congruent, or that's parallel to that. That side is parallel to that. So that works as well. Is 6 minus 4, so they're saying, is this 6 minus 4 equal to 9x plus 3? Well, no, that does not work. Cross that one out. What is the next one we got here? We said 9x plus 3, so we're saying 9x plus 3 equals 10x minus 2. Yep, that works. Does x equal 8? Well, how do we figure that out? Let's just use that 9x plus 3, plug it in, and equal it to 10x minus 2. So we said 9x plus 3 equals 10x minus 2. So how do I want to do this? Let's go plus 2. Come on, pen. Plus 2, plus 2. That cancels. We'll say minus 9x. So what you get over on this side, you get 5 equals x. So does that work? No, it does not. And then the longest side has a length of 60. Well, if you plug that 5 back in to either this or this, well, 5 times 5, that gives you 25. 5 times 12, yep, that gives you 60. So that one works as well. Sweetness. And I think that's about all she wrote. Yep. Well, thank you guys for listening, and I will see you soon. Take care.